I'm Martha, I'm 35 and I'm a woman. I've been married to Jay, who is 41, for 2 years. My marriage was fine, if I had to sum it up in one word. We got used to living together and there wasn't much exciting going on in our lives. I had this strange idea, so I suggested that maybe if we could open our relationship and have more people get involved, it might help. I thought that if we opened our relationship, it would improve our marriage. I was wrong. I never imagined that such a suggestion would turn my boring and mundane life into a roller coaster. Let me start at the beginning so you understand what I'm talking about and can give me better advice. I met Jay and didn't find him interesting at first. He was a boring banker, but since I was going through a rough patch financially, and I guess I found Jay interesting and decided to date him. I just needed some good financial advice to help me get through my expenses and budgeting. We kept meeting often, and he ended up proposing just 3 months into our relationship. I was still dealing with some bad financial decisions and thought that it would be better to get married and have someone else deal with my problems. I knew it was a terrible idea to marry someone because of a crisis you are in, but I really did not know what else to do. We got married, had sex, and everything was okay. Jay took care of the expenses and everything else you would expect a man to do around the house. I was relieved that I didn't have to do everything all by myself and that I had someone to rely on both physically and financially. I enjoyed being a housewife, cooking meals for my husband and waiting for him to get back from work so that we could have dinner together while watching TV. I didn't have much to complain about at first, but it all became boring after a while. There wasn't much fun in doing the same thing every day. Jay did help me out when he could, but it was more like I could do all of this. Even with my eyes closed, I felt like I was just going through the motions and not really living my life. I decided to make a change. Once I had everything set up to run smoothly at home, my neighbor Catherine, who was also a housewife, suggested that I join their kitty club. I didn't mind as I didn't really have anything going on at home. For the first 2 months, I really enjoyed it as it was something new and I wasn't getting. After a few months, I got tired of sitting at home and listening to them. They were always complaining about their husbands. They were competing with each other to see who could be the most miserable wife. I didn't have anything to contribute to the conversation. My marriage wasn't perfect, but I didn't have any complaints. Jay was a good husband. I started to distance myself from the group because it was getting too negative. I started distancing myself from the group as it was getting too toxic. I did make one good friend from all of that. Catherine was not only my neighbor but also my confidant. We both shared any problems or issues that we had in our lives with each other. After the kitty club, we decided to give our health a priority, so we started going to the gym. Catherine started dating one of our gym instructors. He obviously had a good body and a better stamina than her husband, but it was still cheating. Catherine kept encouraging me to do something a bit more adventurous because we both knew that we could easily get away with it. I didn't want to give in to the temptation because I believed in my marriage and I could never cheat on Jay. However bad my marriage was, it wasn't worth cheating. I let Catherine do her thing and didn't judge her for the fact that she was cheating on her husband. As days went by, Catherine started spending less time with me and more time with her new lover. I didn't blame her and was happy to see her happy. Before I knew it, I was alone again and back to my boring life. I quit going to the gym because it was no fun doing workouts alone while Catherine was sleeping with the instructor in the bathrooms. I felt like Jay and I were living the same life every day. I just wanted some change and not to continue living a boring life. I discussed this with one of my friends who I knew was previously having. She had similar problems and was now very happy with her marriage. I felt she would be the right person to take advice from. She told me that one thing that helped her and her husband get on the same page was when they decided to open their marriage. She looked at my expression and told me that it worked for her and I could give it a try. There was nothing to lose in trying to help my marriage work. It was better than cheating on Jay. He would know what was going on. I needed to do something drastic to make sure we don't continue living like this. I was sure that I did not want to do anything by hiding or keeping it away from Jay since he had always been a good husband. I wanted to be as good a wife as I could be. The thought of opening my marriage kept running in my head. It was stuck like a bad song and was hard to not keep thinking about it. I started reading articles on the advantages of having an open marriage. Most of the articles mention that it helps in some cases for the husband and wife to open up with each other. The more I read, the more I could see that it might work for us. I'd not liked it when I initially heard it from my friend, but after reading and knowing a few facts, I thought we could give it a try. Opening up about our desires and exploring the possibility of an open marriage seemed like a good idea. I read a lot of articles about the advantages of having an open marriage. Most of them said that it can help a lot of couples to be more open with each other. The more I read, the more I thought that it could work for us. When I first heard about it from my friend, I wasn't sure, but after reading and learning a few facts, I thought we could give it a try. Opening up about our desires and exploring the possibility of an open marriage seemed like a good idea. I thought it could be a way to get our relationship moving again. The articles said that communication and trust are really important, so I thought it might help us to talk things through. I decided to talk to Jay over the weekend. I made sure that I made the surroundings and the environment perfect for him so that when we have this conversation it gets easier for him to agree to it. I started with how I had been feeling lately. I told him it wasn't his fault. I suggested we try something new to rekindle our love for each other. I explained what I had in mind and told him we'd only go ahead if he was okay with it. He didn't speak for a couple of minutes, and my heart was beating fast because I wasn't sure if he understood. After what felt like 2 decades, he finally spoke and asked if this was something I told him that I'm not really sure if this is what he thinks will make me happy, but it's something new that we could try out and see how it goes. I also explained that it would have been so easy for me to cheat on him without his knowledge, but that would break the trust between us. I guess saying that helped him make up his mind and agree to my suggestion. Well, it went very smoothly, which was something I wasn't expecting. I thought it would be a long, never instead of a heated argument. The conversation was calm and short, ending on a positive note. I was pleased with the way things were going and looking forward to seeing what the future held. The next day, I woke up feeling optimistic. I was feeling really positive and excited, thinking about all the possibilities. I installed a bunch of dating apps to look for prospective men and women who we could invite to spend time with us. I didn't want it just for myself, as I wanted even Jay to have some fun. I knew that he wouldn't get the time to look. I suggested to Jay over breakfast that dating apps might be the best place to find people who would be willing to get into relationships with married couples. He seemed uninterested and told me to do whatever I thought was right. I couldn't understand if he was happy with the idea. I wasn't sure if he had any objections, but I was pretty sure he was fine with it. Maybe he just wanted me to keep myself busy, which would help me not feel bored all the time. He seemed pretty normal as he got ready for work, kissed me goodbye, and left. I chatted with a lot of people. One guy caught my attention. I spoke to him and explained the situation I was in. He was fine with it as long as we had sex. I told him we could meet after 2 days at my house and sent him the details. When Jay came home in the evening, I was excited to tell him. I told him I'd found someone who was willing to get into a relationship with me. I explained the situation to Jay, and he said he was happy to see me happy. We had lots of sex at night after a really long time. I was so tired I don't even remember when I dozed off. I woke up very late in the morning and realized that Jay had already left for work. When I got up in the morning, I saw that Jay had already left for work. I went to the kitchen and found a note from him. It said that there were some important papers in the study that I should take a look at. I went to the study and pulled out the papers. I felt like I was dreaming. This wasn't real. How could Jay have divorced papers, and that too already with the signatures on them? I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I ran to our bedroom and grabbed my phone. I tried calling Jay, but his phone was switched off and he didn't even show up at work. I had no idea where he'd gone. I've been trying to get hold of Jay all day. I gave up and needed to let off some steam, so I started writing this post to express my feelings and find out what went wrong in my marriage to lead to this. I guess this is what happens when you try to have it all. I think I was expecting too much. I wanted a loving husband at home who would take over all the financial responsibility and also have a lover who would treat me like a queen and shower me with love. Thanks for reading my long post. I'm grateful you're taking the time to read this. If anyone has any advice on how to resolve this situation, please let me know. I'm willing to accept a less exciting married life if it means saving my marriage. Any help or suggestions would be appreciated. Thanks again for listening. Hearing my story and getting lots of advice on what I should do next, I'll start by saying that I've been through all the stages of betrayal that everyone goes through. At first, I was in denial and thought Jay would come back. He was probably taking time to process everything I told him. It wasn't an easy decision for him to share his wife with someone else. I was sure he'd think it through and come back to me once he'd made up his mind. As the days passed, I started to lose confidence. My confidence started to wane as the week went on. I was starting to think that he might not come back. I tried to get hold of him, but he wasn't answering his phone, or I couldn't find him at his office or with his friends. I even tried the bars he usually goes to, but nobody had seen him. I sent him lots of voicemails asking him to forget everything and just come back home. I was even willing to wait around for him. I was ready to give up and just continue living this boring life. If I had hurt his feelings, I had become so lethargic that all I did was wake up in the morning, have my coffee, lie on the couch and binge Netflix shows. I didn't even feel like taking a shower. It was almost 10 days since Jay had gone away. I went outside to get the rubbish bins, and when I checked the mailbox I saw a letter from Jay. I was really happy and grabbed it, rushing inside to open it. Maybe it was an apology with flight tickets to somewhere exciting. It had a letter which was handwritten by Jay. I started reading it and I started to cry. I started crying as I read the letter. Jay said he'd been having an affair for 6 months when I suggested opening our marriage. He felt guilty and couldn't face me, so he decided to get a divorce and give me the freedom to live. He told me that he'd applied for a transfer to a different city, where he'll be moving with his girlfriend. He said that he'd made arrangements to make sure I get regular money to cover my expenses. He told me that there were a lot of times that he wanted to let me know about his affair and end our marriage. He said he looked so happy in our marriage that he couldn't bring himself to break my heart. He also said there was no way he could come back in my life because he and his girlfriend were expecting their first baby in a couple of months. He asked me not to blame myself for our divorce, even though he said it wasn't my fault. He brought up the idea of an opening marriage, but he still sent the divorce papers. The rest was the same. He asked me to forgive him for the affair and apologized for causing problems. He also sent me a check to help with my expenses. I was so angry that I wanted to rip the check up, but I knew I'd need the money. I sat on the floor reading the letter again and again, hoping it was a prank. I saw the stamp on the letter, which was from a different state, so I knew it wasn't a prank. I started screaming in anger and crying loudly. I was so naive. I had no idea about Jay's affair for almost the entire time we were married. How could his love fade away in just 6 months? I never doubted him. He was the perfect husband. He did everything I asked. Maybe that was my cue to speak up, but I didn't. Even when I was in that stupid kiddie club, all the wives complained about how their husbands spent more time with their mistresses and not with their wives. I didn't pick up on any clues from them about Jay having an affair. At least they knew that there. I was too naive to think that Jay would not be like the other husbands. I was wrong. I was such a fool that even when I had the chance to cheat on Jay, I decided to be the loyal wife and not do anything that would ruin my marriage. I tried my best as a wife, even though it made me miserable. I was miserable, but I never once thought of doing anything that would jeopardize my marriage. So, here I was, sitting with the letter from my husband. He was confessing about an affair that had been going on for about 2 years, which I had no clue about. I didn't know if Jay was too good to hide this affair or I was too blind to think that he was capable of having an affair. The next few weeks were a blur of trying to move out of the house. I didn't want to live there anymore, so I was moving into a motel and figuring it out from there. I knew things were going to be tough going forward. I didn't have a job or a place to live and had no idea what to do with my life. I never expected to be in a financial slump again after being married. I was still holding on to the divorce papers because I knew that signing them would mean giving up. I also knew that, without a divorce, Jay couldn't marry his girlfriend. That was the only positive thing to come out of all this. I was holding on to the divorce papers, but sometimes I didn't see the point. I knew Jay never loved me. Sometimes I had some pretty dark thoughts that made me want to make Jay suffer for what he'd done to me. I was so messed up that even my thoughts didn't match up with who I was. I wrote Jay an email asking him to meet me in person if he really wanted me to divorce him. I wasn't willing to sign the papers unless we met. He really wanted to marry his girlfriend. He was reluctant at first, but eventually agreed. I booked a fancy restaurant because I wanted him to spend a lot of money. He was punctual, but he looked cold. I asked him how he was doing, but he just told me that he didn't have much time and wanted to get straight to the point. He asked me directly what it would take for me to sign the divorce papers. I was surprised by his cold behavior towards me. As far as I remember, he was the one who cheated on me, while I did nothing of the sort. So why was he being so dismissive? He seemed proud of it. I told him that I could take him to court for infidelity if he kept treating me this way. He laughed and said that a court case would only mean that I'd have to hire a lawyer, which I couldn't afford, and also spend a lot of time on it. He said that if I signed the divorce papers, he'd be fine, but I'd lose out. He asked me to be practical and not make an emotional decision. He was willing to give me the money and a job, but in return, all he wanted was for me to sign the divorce papers. I knew it wasn't a bad deal because there was no way Jay would come back to me, even if I decided not to divorce him. I knew that either today or tomorrow, we'd end up getting divorced. It was better to take the money and the job, which would at least. I needed to be independent going forward. I pulled out the papers, signed them, and before I could even say something, Jay grabbed the papers from my hand and left. It was as if I was dealing with a debtor whom I had paid off the money that I owed. I went home and stood under the shower with cold water running all over my body, making it numb. I didn't want to feel any pain. I started crying at how my life turned out just a month ago. I was a bored housewife who wanted some action. Today, I was divorced and standing under the shower crying about not being that bored housewife anymore. Life can be so unpredictable. I was in a bad way. I didn't want to feel any pain, so I started crying about how my life had turned out just a month ago. I was a bored housewife who wanted some action. Today I was divorced and standing under the shower crying about not being that bored housewife anymore. Life can be so unpredictable. A month ago, I wasn't happy being a housewife. I wanted something more. Today, I was crying because I wanted to be that housewife for the rest of my life. People say you're never satisfied with what you have until you lose it. I guess I've completely understood that now. I'd like to thank everyone who has been on my journey over the last month. To anyone who thinks their life is boring and there's not much happening, I'd like to suggest you hold on to it and appreciate what you have. Don't make changes that would ruin everything. I've made mistakes, and I've learned from them. I've also learned that it's important to regularly check in with your partner to make sure that if things are boring, there's a reason for it. I just like to say, don't be like me and pick up clothes when you see them. I hope you all have wonderful, happy relationships for a lifetime. I'm hoping to find my happy ending soon. Thank you for all the love.